gone out. This is a follow-up of what social media was awash with it. It was all over the media, how the recommendation from the WTO's panel for Dr. Okonjo for that top job as WTO DG. So expectedly, there was a lot of hoopla in the country. I think people were jumping the gun with that excitement. All the proliferation of information.
Well,
that,
it sounded like it was a done deal already. WTO recommends. That's what people saw. But recommend just sounded like appointed in people's heads. So I mean,
they needed to calm down and read what exactly is the situation.
Well, which is one of those things that is our responsibility in the media. You know, we do our own bit to cast the headlines, but then, as you say, sometimes people read what they want to read, people understand.
That's always the nature of these
And that's
things.
one thing with communication, but that's why we're here.
Yeah. So to shed light on that, because it's not over yet. Yes, she's got scaled a major hurdle in getting that WTO top job, but at the moment it's still some grounds to cover, which is part of what we will be talking about this morning. So we've got Professor Oyebanji Oyelaron Oyeyinka, who is the Senior Special Advisor on Industrialization to the President, AFDB. Good morning, Prof. Good to see you again today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so it appears as though it's deja vu now, because I remember during that of the AFB, it was a similar matter. Everybody thought, what's going on? What's the impediment? Why? Who's that? But now we're here again now. How did you internalize these things when you saw all these headlines and say, wait a minute, the U.S., they have some concerns about this one now?
Yeah, of course, it's like deja vu. I mean, we've been through this before. Of course, I think people were right, of course, to jump to, rejoicing about Dr. Okonjo Iweala's recommendation. Ordinarily, when the WTO countries make their voting, she scored 164, and the Koreans score 104. Normally, the DG is chosen by consensus. So without the objection by the U.S., this should have been a done deal. But as you remarked in the beginning, this is one more hurdle to cross. It will now go into further negotiations by the internal process of the WTO. So we still hope she will scale through. We've been through this before with Dr. Adesina's election, the same United States. So this is international politics. It's negotiation, it's all manner of, deal making behind the scene. So we hope, we believe with all the effort Nigeria has made so far, we'll be able to scale this hurdle also.
Well, there are a number of firsts in this one, clearly. It's the first time an African has gotten this far. It's the first time a woman has gotten this far. And it is the first time there is this kind of hesitation that there is no consensus yet. In the event that there is no consensus, what are the options? So,
this hasn't happened in the recent time. I recall that for the WTO, the last time this happened was before this new consensual deal-making happened. In that particular instance, what happened was that the two candidates were then asked to serve 3 years each. But once this particular new recommendation had been in place, we haven't had this kind of issue. But if you watch carefully what has happened with WTO, when the Brazilian left in September 1, there were 4 deputy DGs, and one of them ordinarily should have assumed the position of the acting Director General. They couldn't pick anyone. There was a Nigerian, an American, a Chinese, and a German. Up till now, there had been no acting DG. So that was a pointer actually to the difficulties that we see now, that if they couldn't even pick an acting director general, there was problem ahead. But this is the nature of things. As you saw with the Africa Development Bank, we went through all of this. At the end of the day, Dr. Additional still got 100% voting, which had never happened before. The election for the WTO DG started 9 months ago, as is the custom. They go through a very elaborate process. It is a 3-step process whereby countries bring forth their candidates, they are interviewed, and they go through all manner of things. Of course, because of COVID this time around, the candidates were invited to Geneva. They had to do some sort of beauty pageant, selling themselves to different countries before we had this last couple of people emerge. So the two outstanding candidates, of course, Dr. Iweala and the Korean candidate emerged in the last couple of days. But what will happen now will be that on the 9th of November, the board of WTO is going to meet. And I'm sure before then there will be a lot of horse trading and negotiations. And hopefully someone will, this Dr. Iweala will still emerge. You have 164 countries voting. She got so many votes. So we believe that with all the big blocs backing her, the European bloc, China, Japan, all the African bloc supporting her, the Caribbeans, the Oceania. So she has very strong support. So we are hopeful.
You know, yes, we'll still dwell on that for a bit, but give us the benefit of hindsight. I mean, for that of the ADB, the circumstances, I mean, some say it was kind of different in terms of the issues in consideration at the time, but again, it was the same opposition. So in this case, is there any correlation with the typology of the hurdle? But yes, we know the hurdle itself. So any similarity?
Well, I think there are broadly two things that you could identify. One is the Americans' own internal politics. America has withdrawn mostly from multilateralism. The America First agenda of the current administration actually, of course, is in contradistinction to the multilateral world that we have had since 1945. So that plays a big role in this. I mean, one may not know exactly what another administration will have done, but you can almost guess that this might not be as difficult as we are having now. The second, of course, big issue is China. We know that China is ascending the global scale, is now the second most wealthy country to the United States. The Americans have not hidden their own competitive nature to the rise of China. And of course, the increasingly dominant presence of China in Africa has been a problem for not just America, but even some Europeans also. So we could see this playing a part. I do not know for sure if Dr. Iweala being an African is an issue. Being a woman for us is it's a big achievement. She's breaking a huge ceiling. She'll be the first WTO DG a woman. She'll be the first African. So this is something that should be celebrated. But like we are seeing, there are, countries have their own agenda. They have their own, issues both within and at the international stage. So this is what we see playing out. This played out actually in our case during the AFDB. And of course, and this is my own view also, many of the big powers see Africa simply from the lens of the supplier of raw materials to the world. And this is something we cannot hide. Look at the numbers. Africa has only 2% of global trade, 80%, 90% dependency on trade with the world, and mostly in raw materials. Look at Africa. 65% of all arable land in the world, gold, diamond, copper, name it, Africa has it. But we are not present. Even in agriculture trade, we contribute only 4% to the whole global GDP, even though everybody's always excited about Africa having so much raw material. So unless you are present in manufacturing, and this is where Asia broke through. Asia broke through precisely in the middle of the 1980s. If you look closely at the historical part of the two regions, we were almost at par. In the 70s, name it, Nigeria has 6 times the per capita income of China in 1980. It may seem very strange to many people now. We're almost at par with South Korea. And then, of course, they broke through because Africans continue to rely on exporting gold and diamond and oil and gas and so forth to others. So they process and they get more money. So this is all part of the game, and many countries, many of the powers still want Africa to remain the fetchers of water and the hewers of wood, just suppliers raw materials. And this is not even hidden. When you look at global trade, when you export raw materials to Europe, for example, it's almost zero tariff. Whenever you want to export semi-processed or processed material, tariffs escalate to a point where it's not even making sense to export. So this is where, in fact, it's very, very important in the next couple of years for Africa to focus on itself. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is an important trade initiative. $3 trillion zone, the biggest zone in the world. 1.3 billion people. Africa has now the opportunity to trade among itself. And by doing that, we can begin to export manufactured goods among each other. Right now, intra-African trade is about 16%. When you compare to Europe, Asia, almost 60% among themselves. So the time has come, actually. And this is one of the issues we hope an African leading WTO is going to take up and push the agenda of the CFTA and ensure that Africa begins more intensive trading among itself. And more importantly, also to diversify its economies from simply exporting raw materials. I think with that new agreement among ourselves, it's going to be far easier to export processed goods, manufactured goods among Africans. It's taking too long. We've made progress. But for me, within the whole WTO global trade discussion, for me, this is the most important. This is the most crucial at this juncture. In 2020, if Africans are not trading among themselves, we're still fragmented. We need to change that as quickly as possible.
Well, Prof, I think that's a very Herculean task that many people would look at it as a very, very heavy job to do now, given how, quote unquote, divisive we are from some of the things that you have said. But then, from the statistics that you have given, we have very, very significant bargaining power. All of these statistics, we have significant bargaining power. Do you see Africa coming together? Given, of course, I mean, a number of people would say that the job of the DG of the WTO is just that it's not as powerful as that and all of that. But given that role, do you see Africa coming together strongly enough, united enough, to be able to trade with the world with significant bargaining power?
Yes. And you know what is going to what's going to force them to trade is because number one, because we are starting very late. we do not have the technological capability to compete with Asia now. I mean, I always mention Asia because it's like, almost like the Asian century we are in now. But among ourselves, we have that leverage. And what is going to push African leaders is what you just saw in Nigeria. The revolt of the young people, the grinding poverty that we are seeing. Let me give you another statistics. In 2030, according to projection, 50% of the poorest of the poor will be in 3 countries in Africa: DRC, Ethiopia, and Nigeria. If we don't solve the problem of expanding the space of opportunity for young people, we are going to escalate the problems for ourselves. And I'm saying this, that the challenges we face is also an opportunity to induce, it's an inducement mechanism, as I said. When you face a challenge as Africa is facing, so much poverty in the midst of plenty. As I mentioned to you earlier, we have huge arable land, we have minerals, we have all of this. But to get rich, you never see a country that is exporting raw materials getting rich. You never get rich. The guy who takes your raw materials and process it and gets something out of it, he gets richer. You export cassava to someone, he makes industrial starch out of it, he makes methanol out of it. You export your gas to someone, he makes methanol out of it. You export your, name it. All of these things that you see around you, just look around you. You export your cotton to someone, they make clothing and garments out of it. But you get very little. At the end of the day, you get very little. So I'm saying that even if you have leaders in Africa who don't want to do anything, they should think of themselves. They should think of their own children, the young people, who are going to give them a lot of trouble in the years to come. If we face what I call a business as usual scenario, we are not going to have peace. And without jobs, with hunger, you can never have peace. They say an angry man, a hungry man is an angry man. So I think that what happened in Nigeria and has been happening in some parts of the world should be a pointer to us that, yes, we should force ourselves to come together. I don't see these things as impossible. We were divided, but we can talk to ourselves. We can advise ourselves to come together for the sake of the future of Africa.
And speaking about that, I mean, we've seen protests akin to the kind of questions that Nigerians are equally asking at this point in time. So it appears as though Africa is watching themselves, networking, young people. It's a global village now. But in terms of, if you've been able to gauge the psyche of Africans, having seen what played out in that of AFDB, the opposition, the hurdle which we eventually overcame, now that of the WTO, she's scaled the major hurdle. Now the next one, maybe when they have the General Assembly in November 9, hopefully she scales through. What is the psyche, the thinking, the mindset of Africans? Is it shifting towards them saying, wait a minute, we can't keep exporting some of these things. We need to pull together as a bloc and ensure that this trade amongst ourselves, and then our young people, we give them the pride of place. Is that happening?
Yes, yes, indeed. I was extremely very proud of African leaders, the role they played during the issues we had at the AFDB. Africa stood together. A number of these things didn't play out in plain view, but they stood together. All these African finance ministers voted as one. They spoke with one voice, including our country leading the charge and others. So I was quite encouraged. And I think the same sort of, and of course, you talk to them individually, they begin to understand. Because you look at what happened there and what's happening now, you ask yourself, Do we have friends outside? So I was, like I said, very, very encouraged with the way the leaders and the finance, ministers of finance actually stood up and spoke with one voice. If there had been division among them, the whole battle would have been lost. So I believe that Africans are beginning to understand. 60 years after independence for many of these countries, and we are still where we are. Like I said earlier, 2% of global trade, even in agriculture trade, it's 4%. Yet we have most of the raw materials. Between Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Nigeria, we have almost 70% of global cocoa beans. But we don't have up to 10% of chocolate. Somebody else is doing it. And you can apply the same thing to almost all the commodities. So I don't want to mention some sensitive examples, but this is really the issue. If you persist in doing the same thing as Einstein said and you expect the different result, then you are stupid. So I know that to answer your question directly, what I saw during our own struggle in Dr. Adesina's re-election convinced me that African leaders are beginning to understand. And I know that what happened in Nigeria, it's a mix of issues, right? There are, the young people who came and organized themselves in a very orderly, peaceful manner. Of course, things took a different turn when, others jumped in and began to destroy things, which is quite unfortunate. I don't think this is what we should be doing, but I believe that a lot of the leaders will be searching their own minds now and asking questions. These numbers that we throw around, they are not numbers, they are people. They are people. When you say 60% of Nigeria's population are young people below the age of 35, that should tell you something. It's both a challenge and an opportunity because the young people, among them are where you have the most innovative people. I was watching some of the television clips and I was thinking to myself, can you imagine all of these people? We aggregate all their energy, all the hours spent on the street, just doing something productive, thinking through some formulas of mathematics or doing something that will help the country, doing some ICT or doing, having them in factories somewhere. And that was what was going through my mind, actually, when I was thinking, so we can harness the energy of young people. And this is what Asia has leveraged now. We have the opportunity. Africa is the youngest continent right now. So I believe that our leaders are beginning to understand, and I will encourage them to please not look at this, what has happened, as something bad. I think it's a wake-up call for all of us. All of us, not just political leaders, leaders across the spectrum, to wake up and really think seriously how we can best utilize the energy, the innovativeness, creativity, and the energy of young people.
Yes, indeed. That's how we live it today. And also good to know that, you think that at the end of the day, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala will scale through.
Yes, indeed. I'm very hopeful. I think Nigeria has done its homework. I believe she has worked very hard. So many people have worked very hard for her election. And with the consensus nature of the WTO system, even in spite of this objection by the United States, at the end of the day, I believe common sense is going to prevail in the same way that we have at the AFDB.
All right, so that's good to know. At the end of the day, the eyes will have it. Well, thank you very much indeed, Professor Oyebanji Oyelaron Oyeyinka, who is a Senior Special Advisor on Infrastructure to the President, AFDB.